Ajahn Jayanto is the abbot of Temple Forest Monastery in Boston, in US. He grew up in Boston and attended University of Wisconsin. He was not a spiritual person at that time. To him, religion is just about morality. Religion is the subject that teaches people to be happy and well, and so you do not mind about the inequalities of society. And he decided to embark on a world travel for a year. You know, at that age, you are curious about the world. He went to Europe, Israel, he went to India, Nepal, and Tibet. During this year of travel, he read a lot. He met with different people, and he read about Hinduism, about the Upanishad under Brahmanism, and he also read the Dhammapada. And that made a deep impression on him. And he also was interested in meditation, because in India, he heard that, oh, you know, this teacher is good and can perform miracles, and he was interested. And he went back after 1 year to US, and he felt that something has changed in him. It's like he was thinking a lot more, and he was very interested in meditation and joined the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center. And through the experiences that he had, he found that, hey, the mind is so profound, there's something so interesting in there. And there's more to life than what you see and what you hear. And to him, it was like the truth is something bigger than himself. And he wanted to know how to search. And then he asked about and say, look, I need to have training. I need to have some kind of structure that will help me in mental cultivation. At that time, he was still not religious. And he was looking for a religion, but most of the religion at that time was about seeking to attain some kind of spiritual reinforcement or status. And that didn't appeal to him. So he made inquiries, and then a lot of people referred him to Longpo Sumedo at that time. Longpo was in Amaravati in UK. So he flew to UK. One Dhamma talk, and that sealed it. And he said that was the choice, the natural choice to make. There was no turning back. And at 23 years of age, he ordained to become a monk. He is in the 50s, and he is over 20 years Vasa, and he is the youngest abbot in the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Chah lineage. And he's accompanied by Ajahn Jayanto to come to Singapore this time round. If you go to US, you may want to visit the Temple Forest Monastery. It's very peaceful, near the woods, and they have Dhamma talks on Saturday, Sunday, puja on the weekdays. And if you want to just experience what it's like to practice solitude, they have winter retreat spanning 3 months, where you can look after the Sangha, support them in their retreat, and also for your own practice. Okay? If you want to support the Temple Forest Monastery, there is a box here under Sangha support, and you can do dana. Okay? Time is up, so I think we shall call Ajahn.
And the title of today's talk is, can you remind me? Watching the world as it changes, and the secret ingredient to observe and let go. I forgot to bring the secret ingredient with me, did you? Okay. The secret ingredient, it is the thing, isn't it? That's what we are looking for. The good news of Buddhism, as it were, is that there actually is a secret ingredient. And it's not something we don't have. It's something we always have had and always will. It's just easily missed and obscured. So that's what we're doing when we try to develop meditation. You know, we trying to clear the obstructions to seeing what we already have, which is the ability to know things as they are and not get, not suffer with them, not get brought into the world that we're watching, but simply let it come through and let go. So we hear this word letting go, this phrase all the time if we're familiar with Buddhist circles. And it sounds great, and we know, yes, that's what I should do. I should let go. And then we try, and lo and behold, we can't do it. We think maybe we fool ourselves at first. We think, I'm Buddhist now. I've let go. I don't get angry anymore. I believe in love. I believe in awakeness and not sleepiness, in calmness, not irritation, and so therefore that's how I am. Aren't I good? And then we probably pretty quickly realize it doesn't work. You can't just tell yourself to let go and tell yourself to be loving and tell yourself not to be angry, and that's what happens. So meditation is mind work. We were talking today. It's not really so much just a particular exercise. It's just the process, the effort that we make to work with our minds, to develop our minds. And we say mind, in Buddhism, we're not just talking about the brain and thinking. We're talking about, you could just as easily say the heart. It's a full experience of consciousness, and we're trying to work with our, what we call in Buddhism, mental experience. So this is something that we work with in different ways, not just sitting cross-legged and following our breath or doing a particular exercise, but it's something we work with by being conscious about the way that we live. And it's why it always includes what we call sila, or moral integrity. So it's basically something that we can see for ourselves in terms of the results of our intentional actions when we are speaking to people, when we're doing things, when we're with ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how we think about other people. So our mental actions, how we speak to other people, how we speak to ourselves, in a sense, in an inner voice. You could call that a form of verbal action. And then, of course, what we do, if we're involved in things which are harmful to ourselves or others, or beneficial. So we start to notice that these things have an effect on our experience of the world, of ourselves, our whole experience. And so that's the mind. The mind really is all of this. And to work with it, we can't just simply rely on exercises, say concentration exercises. That's important, but it's only part of it. The whole thing is what we're working with. In other words, our whole life. So that's why you hear, things about the precepts always in Buddhism. It's not just about, say, mindfulness and meditation. It's also about being willing to restrain ourselves from intentionally harming ourselves or others, and other beings included. And then also we start to notice the benefits of cultivating positive qualities, positive actions. So generosity is not something we do just so that we'll, get a gold star and someone will consider us a good Buddhist. It's something we do because we realize when we see for ourselves what the result is, there's this happy feeling in the heart. There's a letting go, which becomes possible, which I couldn't do just because I wanted to let go before, but it starts to relax in the heart as a result of being generous rather than being greedy and selfish. And it's not because I'm doing what I think I should be doing and following the judging mind about trying to become an ideal Buddhist, but it's because I realize that working with my actual experience means being very conscious and careful with my intentional, the way I relate to my experience. So relate to people, relate to myself, relate to everything. And so then we become, if we do get interested in this, we see that it's this not only for the benefit of other people. I mean, it does benefit them if I stop being cruel and start being kind and stop being dishonest and start being honest. Obviously it benefits others, but it's not just for their sakes. We start to see that actually, in fact, centrally, it's for our own sakes. We see how much better it feels to be kind and how much worse it feels to be cruel, how much worse it feels to be selfish, how much better it feels to be generous. And so working with the mind, we're not just looking for, say, good experiences through our concentration meditation. We're also looking to see how the results of our actions affect our mental experience. And then once we've done that, and I've included, say, our whole life, when we sit down on the meditation cushion, it's not so much a matter of kind of squeezing ourselves into like a tube of toothpaste to kind of pop out at the other end into bliss. We basically just can let go, be relaxed, and the mind naturally rests because it's not being stirred up by feelings of guilt or remorse or fear or anxiety or stress that has been the result of our actions. So the calming of the mind is something that happens naturally. It's helped along by these techniques that we practice, but it's mainly coming from the way that we've started to change how we live. And that's something which works to a high degree, just simply by, say, restraining ourselves from doing harmful actions, which is what the 5 precepts help us to do. That's what they're about. But also, obviously, by cultivating positively, trying to go out and be kind and go out and be generous and do good things. That really helps. But the main ingredient, the secret ingredient, it's not so secret. That's the thing. The Buddha shared it. It was the whole point. And but it is secret in the sense that it's not obvious to any of us when we're growing up. And that is wisdom. Mindfulness and wisdom. Awareness itself is not wisdom necessarily. We can use these words in different ways, so it can be confusing. But let's say mindfulness with a small m or awareness with a small a. That is, you can be a very mindful bank robber and successfully get away with the cash, right? And you can be a mindful soldier and successfully fight. So it's wisdom. The panya is the Pali word, but it's wisdom which allows us to see for ourselves that these things are going to bring pain. These things are going to bring harm, and they're to be avoided. It's not because we're trying to please the Buddha or anyone else. It's because we see that this is a way to make our own experience one of hell rather than heaven. So, along with awareness, we need wisdom and insight. We need to develop that for ourselves and not just take it on faith from the Buddha or anybody else that we hear or a book that we read, but find a way to discover that for ourselves, to see for ourselves the truth of these of this path. So these teachings are a way to help us do that, and that's really all they're intended to be. They're like a toolbox. They're not meant to. We're not trying to join a club and be good members of the club just for the sake of it. Although that can be fun too. We're in a club that can be quite fun actually, and sometimes it's not so fun. But usually it's pretty good. But there's no point in, say, being a monk or a nun, or in being a Buddhist, if it's not helping us learn for ourselves what suffering is and what the release from suffering is, what true happiness is. And that's something which is not, it's not particularly Buddhist per se. It's just a capacity that we as human beings, we could even just say conscious beings, have. And the Buddha pointed out ways that we can then experiment for ourselves and learn this for ourselves, so that if we so choose, we can release ourselves from that which binds us. So that's something that, little by little we start to see just by opening our eyes. And the meditation practice, like we were doing tonight, sitting and watching our breath, and really actually just sitting and trying to develop the ability to stay with awareness in the present moment without getting drawn into the worlds we're constantly creating, our mental world. just doing that is a way to start to see for ourselves. It's like a way to grow the capacity to learn for ourselves so that we can start to learn our own lessons. Once we do that, if we do give ourselves to this practice of being able to watch and have that be settled and natural, so that again comes not just from sitting in meditation, but also the way we're living with each other, not causing harm to each other intentionally or to ourselves. A settledness can start to deepen, where we can then have the ability to watch ourselves as we live our life. We go about our daily life, whatever it might include. We talk to people, we relate, we have relationships, we have work, we do whatever we do. And we then can also be noticing, watching ourselves. And what do we want to see? What do we want to watch? And this is the thing that we are guided to explore by the Buddha in particular ways. And so the title of the talk, The Changing World, this is one of the things we notice, the fact that, everything is constantly changing. This is something we know intellectually, it's quite obvious. And as a concept, it has some use, but not that much in terms of really being able to let go of our suffering. But as something that we're choosing to notice as an observational exercise as we go around our life, it can have a real power. So that what are we watching? We're not just watching others. We're not just watching, the fact that, these buildings arise in Singapore. Last time I was here, there were less buildings. The first time, there were many less buildings. Now there's one with a big half a banana on the top of it. And I'm sure there's going to be other amazing things, so that it's not just looking outside at the changes outside, although that can be helpful, but it's mainly watching the changes of the mind, our internal experience, my experience of me. My experience of me, I think, okay, I'm me, here I am. I'm talking to you, right? But that's just a thought. Actually, if I watch, it changes all the time. It was different in there waiting for this talk. It's different right now. It was different this morning. It was very different 3 weeks ago. It was very different 3 years ago, and it was extremely different when I was 7 years old, right? The whole body was different, not only the mind. So our bodies change, yes, and we can really benefit from watching that and noticing it. But especially our minds change. And if we really use it as an exercise to start to watch ourselves, if we live our life, we realize we're not the same person all the time. In fact, we're a different person sometimes depending on who we're talking to and what they're saying to us. I'm a different person if someone praises me than I am if someone criticizes me. And I'm a different person if my mother talks to me or if some total stranger talks to me. And so these again, when we think about it, it's fairly obvious. We wonder, okay, yeah, that's interesting, but if we use it as a way of really observing in the moment as it's happening, it starts to change, has the power to transform our experience of who we are. And to be able to trust that change is something which takes some faith. They say saddha in Buddhism. This word which means trust or confidence or faith in the teachings, it's hard to see that at first because we like to think I am, I've built up an identity and this is who I am, and it's threatening to think I might not be that way. But if we watch, we see it's not only not true, but it's also a huge effort to maintain it, because I don't have to just maintain it to myself. I have to maintain, other people looking at me in this right way for me to keep seeing myself the way I want to see myself. Means everybody else I'm in relationship with must also be seeing me that way too. And so if they don't, if I feel threatened, I better change their mind. No, CC, I really didn't mean it that way. I am a good person, really, truly. And so we're constantly feeling this social pressure that we're putting on ourselves, which is really based on this need to have this feeling of I am a certain way, I am a certain person. So it can be a way of allowing letting go to happen by simply practicing in our ordinary lives an awareness of how we change, our mental changes, our perceptual changes, and our emotional changes, all of this, just simply with quiet awareness, a sort of present moment consistency of just a quiet observation We don't have to change anything else. We can be going about our day and feel the emotions. Maybe it's high emotions, maybe low. Maybe our minds are busy, maybe they're not. Maybe we feel happy, maybe we feel sad. Whatever the mood, doesn't really matter. We can still observe. And in terms of observation, the moods don't matter. They're of same value. So once we trust this and have the ability to be mindful, it gives us the ability to be less dependent for our happiness on having the right moods and the right emotions and the right feelings. Everything is able to loosen up. We can start to let go a bit because we see that we are not what we thought we were. We're not a whole, particular set of emotions. I'm not this body that I have to keep healthy and looking good and putting, cream on or whatever it is, right? Because we know it's going to get old. So there's always this stress. If I'm this body, well then there's this, and I want to stay like this. That's stressful, isn't it? Because we know we're not going to stay like this. It's only going in one direction, especially if we're over whatever it is. I think males are peak at 19? That was what I heard once. I heard that when I was 18 and it seemed kind of all right then. The female's probably a little older, I'm not quite sure. But basically, it starts deteriorating. And we all know that, we can feel it, and so we do the best with it. But being able to have a sense of awareness, which is something we can trust, and allow change to happen in this kind of way, means we have a sense of refuge, a place that we can rest and reside, which doesn't depend on these things staying the same. The deterioration is fine. It's actually part of nature. And while I might know this up here, it's really hard to just let go without having this wisdom, this insight into the process. So the meditation, the sila, the way that we're living, in terms of our moral integrity, all of this is going to help us create the capacity to see for ourselves how we unnecessarily create suffering. We unnecessarily get bound up in these things which are outside of our control. We can influence them, but they're not in our control. And they're constantly changing. We don't have to do that. We don't have to get bound up like that. We can actually let them go. And we don't just disappear. We don't just, fall through the roof of the floor. We're still here, and things can flow, they can change, and we can start to trust that. So we use the teachings to help know what to watch with our mindfulness and our awareness. We watch how things change. We watch how they're not just me. The sense of identity with it all changes if we notice how it itself changes, right? It's not the same. You can't find anything other than this sense of consciousness itself, which is changing. So then we start to identify maybe with the consciousness itself. And even that then, if we notice over time, it's a good, really important, necessary first step. But if we're identifying, even just with the mind, with consciousness and mindfulness itself, that identification itself is also a tension, a certain stress, a certain, you could say, dukkha, a kind of unsatisfactory suffering. And so, in the end, it really isn't to be held to either. An idea of me as consciousness watching everything is just an idea of me again. So all of it, in the end, is just natural. It's nature. Buddhism is a way of giving us the tools to understand nature as it is. And really the essence of it for us is around happiness and unhappiness, you could say. We say suffering. In English it's a little too strong sometimes because dukkha, it really means not able to satisfy. Sometimes we feel great. And the dukkha there is that we know it's going to change and we can't keep it that way. There's always the seeds for the sort of a certain subtle stress in whatever our experience is, even if it's really good. We know we're going to die. We don't know what comes after. We might have our ideas about that, but the truth is we don't know. And that truth can be threatening. So we start to, the secret ingredient, the special ingredient, what do you call it? The active ingredient, right? The one that actually has the effect is mindfulness and wisdom, satipanya. You're really wanting to have awareness and with a way of seeing that shows us, we see for ourselves how we unnecessarily get bound into, identify with all of this stuff that's changing. My emotions, my thoughts, the world, the politics, my body, my relationships, all of it. If I want to focus on one and say, okay, well, I can't do anything about the politics, but I'll get a good job and I'll keep it, well, I'm going to suffer, right? Even if you succeed, you're going to always be afraid it's going to change. And then eventually, somehow, it does change, even if it's, time to retire. Or if my kids, I'm going to have, that's where I'll get my happiness from. I don't have kids. I made that choice. I think I had wisdom myself, but that's because I'm a monk. But those of you who have kids, well, do you? Is it just endless happiness, and that's where you can rely for your happiness on your kids? Having kids, it's a wonderful thing. It's not. I'm not kind of dismissing the kind of conventional, valuable warmth and blessings that we can have in our relationships as human beings, including family. But it's to point out the limitations of those, where they do come to a point where they're not going to give you ultimate happiness. And the Buddha's offering to us was that we can discover for ourselves, if we so choose, that there is actually an ultimate happiness. We can actually find it. We don't have to wait to die and go to the right place. We can right now use this experience that we have to learn in these ways, which will result in a relief, a release, a coolness that goes towards what the Buddha called Nibbana. And that's something for each of us to find for ourselves. So those are a few words.
Okay, brothers and sisters, any questions?
There's one way
Brother
back
Chan,
there.
yes.
Oops. Yeah, that's what happens sometimes.
Thank you, Bhante, for that very short and very insightful brief talk. And from what I can understand, what you're saying is that you're talking about impermanence, the inability to try to stop what is going to change all the time, and then let's do dukkha, and then you also somehow indirectly point to non-self. So what I want to know is that besides that inability to control changes in ourselves as the usual means of trying to understand non-self, is there any simpler way for us to understand this non-self easily without relying on, say, okay, if this is me, I should be able to control myself. I should say I don't want to die and I won't die. That's the usual way of trying to explain non-self.
Yes.
Are there any other more profound way or simpler way or whatever?
Well, yeah, direct observation of self, so like that's the conceptual, way that we can think about it. But non-self is not something we can understand conceptually. It's only something we can realize. And it's really the result of our practice, so it's hard to kind of do the practice of seeing non-self. But if you want to see non-self, then, then the way to do it is to see self. We investigate what is self. So we don't try to kind of see non-self somehow. You kind of or pretend that we're not somebody. So you look into what we are, and so it's a matter of a kind of a gentle observation of our experience as a human being, so that through this practice, like I was saying, you start to see that like my sense of who I am changes. And it's not so much to try to, get to the realization of non-self by seeing change. It's more just noticing that now I'm one person. Here I am speaking, giving a talk. That's one me, right? And then wake up, nobody's around. That's a different one, right? And so you start to just notice what is self, and it has to do with things that are not they are not permanent. So it is a good way to describe it, but the way of seeing it is not to think about that. It's more to observe self, really to kind of observe yourself. And it's in relation to, all of this is in relation to the kind of pushing and pulling in that we have with what we call dosa and lopa, aversion and greed. And so that's, if we're watching that dynamic, then you really see how we are different at different times. That helps.
Thank you. My car is legally parked, so I have to go.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Oh, here's one.
Yeah, I was wondering how do you understand right effort? The Buddha said that when you realize that there's no wholesome, when you realize that there's unwholesome thought, you are supposed to. Okay, when you realize that there's unwholesome thought, you are supposed to eradicate it, and when you realize that there's no unwholesome thought, you are supposed to let it continue that way. But if you realize that there is no unwholesome thought, you are supposed to arouse the wholesome energy. How do we understand this right effort?
So it's a question about right effort, and yeah, that formulation is a good one. It's about so you kind of, the main thing isn't so much about what you don't do necessarily in a specific way. It's more about the power and usefulness of noticing wholesomeness and unwholesomeness. Because normally we're just in our thoughts and we're justifying them in one way or another, and we're kind of not really noticing the effect that they're having on us. So we might have assumptions about certain kinds of thoughts and assume that they're good. Like, okay, I'm going to say go out and give food to the poor or something, and that's good. So that's a good thought, and I'm going to go and do it, and it's a good action. And then, but if we notice, maybe for one person in one instance, they're doing that because they want to impress somebody, a girl that they're hoping falls in love with them, and they'll think that I'm a good person that way. And so, if she sees me giving food to the poor, then she'll look at me in a better way, right? So then you kind of notice, well, wait a minute, there's some self-interest here. I'm not really actually thinking about these hungry people. I'm not really trying to help them. I'm really trying to help myself, right? So this sense of actually noticing wholesomeness and unwholesomeness is the focus of right effort. And then when you're doing that, you know which direction you want to go in, which is towards the wholesome, not because it's good and you want to be a good person and get your gold star. It's more, you realize that's taking you towards, the unwholesome takes you towards pain, and the wholesome takes you towards relief from pain, towards happiness. And so it's, right effort is you're kind of, first of all, noticing effort in body, speech, and mind, your actions and relationships in those terms. And then, obviously, if you then notice that and you're caught up in doing something which is unwholesome, which is going to have, lead you into pain, then you stop doing that. So there's that part of it. And then when you kind of want to practice and create continual conditions for this letting go and wisdom to arise, then you make an effort to do good things that are going to, have a good result. So say you have, a habit of watching movies every night and then watching, kind of doing your social media and YouTube until 2 a.m. or something. And then you notice, not that anyone here has ever done anything like that, I'm sure. And then you notice it's having effect on your mind over time, right? And so you kind of like, it's not that, so you notice, okay, for me right now, this is actually having an unwholesome effect because I see the effect on my mind. So you stop doing that. And then maybe you notice that actually if you do some exercise and go to sleep early, you wake up and you feel really good. It has a really good effect on your mind, on your life. So then you start doing those things. And so you're cultivating actions which are going to have a wholesome effect. I don't know if I missed a specific point in your question, but that's the basic right effort.
Okay, what you the example that I just gave, right, is that we practice right effort when we are doing things. What about when we are not doing things, like we are just sitting there waiting for the bus or something like that? Are we supposed to practice right effort 24/7?
Well, you have there's no supposed to. It's just opportunity. It's like there's just reality, and so we have a choice. And the thing about karma is, it's not something that we can. It's not something that we can't change. It's the opposite. It's something we cannot help but continually create our future. We're always doing it, whether we want to or not. So like when you're sitting there at the bus, you have a choice, and you can let your mind just wander into stuff, and maybe it's not good, not bad, and okay. So it just kind of helps make you more sort of sleepy over time or whatever. Or you can be actually thinking about, how am I going to finally win that argument with the person I had last week, and you can spend your time doing that. And that's going to have an effect. It won't be good. And or you can actually choose to spend your time, say, meditating, and that's a great time actually to do mindfulness meditation, is waiting for the bus. You can also make other choices. You can, like, if you do have a tendency to go into anger and resentment, you can actually make a choice to practice metta with the people around. Like, imagine that they're your relatives, or they're your mother or your father, or kind of, you can cultivate mental exercises that have an effect of reminding us about these good qualities that we've experienced before. We just might forget in that moment. And so you can do stuff in your mind, you can do stuff verbally, you can do stuff physically. That's a good one too. I mean, I remember it was one of those old talks, wasn't it? If you've read those books that were transcribed from Ajahn Jayanto, when they got to London they'd been in Thailand with Ajahn Chah in the forest for so many years, and then suddenly they were in this, when they started the monasteries in England, they were in this townhouse across from a pub in London in the 70s. Those were and they used to have to go on the tube, the underground in London sometimes, to accept invitations. And this was like late 70s London, like the punk, they were all like red mohawks and earrings everywhere, and leather jackets with spikes, and so the London tube in the late 70s wasn't as pleasant as it is now, I don't think. But it certainly wasn't pleasant at any rate for someone who'd been used to life in the forest in a kuti for years. So Ajahn Sumedho just decided, he watched what it was doing to his mind, he just decided, he's not going to do anything else. You have to stand there and wait to get to your station. So he's going to use it as a metta, a loving kindness practice. Every time he gets on the tube, practice loving kindness. And it had this totally transformed it. He started looking forward to going on the tube because you'd be able to practice loving kindness. And we can do that. We all have that choice, always. And the thing about it is, if we don't, we're lucky. It's amazing we don't get into more trouble than we do, because we're so sort of asleep at the wheel. It's almost like a drunk driving this 18-wheeler on a highway, and bringing practice into our life, like getting more aware, is a way of like just waking up at the wheel. We are actually driving our experience forward. We're creating our experience. And if we don't want to practice, that's our choice. It's fine. But what it means is that if our minds are caught in negative patterns, in unwholesome and harmful patterns, then it's going to continually sort of lead us in that direction. That's what our experience will be, more and more into the future.
Well, I want to, because we are speaking about wholesome and unwholesome, I just want to share some of my own observation. So since I started meditation, I I can be more sensitive to my energy flow in the energy. So my own observation is that when I'm doing something or my mental state is wholesome, then the energy tend to be more evenly distributed around my body. I feel very light and happy, like I'm doing metta or compassion. But when there is an unwholesome thought, the energy tend to contracting, like worry or anger is contracting here and make my body also uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it becomes more obvious, because my body react to the mental state directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that become more obvious for me. So
Yeah.
when I get angry, I immediately feel headache, and I say, oh, it's not good for me. Then I just try to.
Yeah. We pay attention to these things through the physical energy system too, like that. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Just want to share my own.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ajahn, thanks for your talk. Just like to clarify, because the topic today is about letting go, but we just now you mentioned a lot about internal reflection, because external wise there could be changes. So normally we tend to react or respond by either fighting it, which is resisting, or we can take flight, like avoid. But ultimately this whole thing will still come back to us. So what you're saying is that we stay with the change and stay with our reaction or even our feeling with the change. Am I right to say so? Yeah. Because I can't stop the change from happening,
Right.
even myself or even my mind or my thinking mind. I can't even catch up.
Right.
So what you're saying is that to stay with what I'm sensing now, whether is it bodily, emotion, or even my slip of anger, for example. So it's watching that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how do we know, sometimes you take 2 steps forward, and
Yeah.
I realize sometimes I took another 2 steps backward again.
Yeah.
I'm back to
Sure.
square one.
Yeah.
So it's always a struggle. So how do we get the motivation to continue? Sometimes we have good day, easy to continue.
Yeah.
When the bad day comes and, can be overwhelming. So how do we cope in that sense?
Yeah.
What type of effort should we, put in? Yeah.
Yeah, Ajahn Chah apparently used to say that when you want to meditate, meditate. When you don't want to meditate, meditate. It's that kind of evenness where we just find a way of just continuing even when we don't see the point or it seems to not be working, and that has a real power. So sometimes it's just this sort of, we call it sort of patient endurance, where you're just kind of having to go through it as a way of developing patience, if nothing else. And that has a real good effect too, just in itself. And so what keeps us having faith enough that that there's a point to do all this is individual. Sometimes different people will find different things help. So you might find, opening up a particular Dhamma book or something helps you. Maybe not. Maybe some kind of, particular practice or exercise helps you. But in the end, all of us will go through disillusionment, because it's just the other side of inspiration. So as high as we go with inspiration, then normally we'll go that low with disillusionment, and we need to have something that carries us through. And it's just natural. And also, sometimes, what seems to be things getting worse is in fact a sign of things getting better. Like sometimes when we do open up in these ways, then there's a natural, like, rubber band effect where you get sprung backwards. And that's just part of it. It's often what one might experience after retreats. You have a wonderful meditation retreat, and then afterwards, it lasts for a little longer, and you think, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to be like this from now on. And then before you know it, you're worse than you were before, it seems. And some of it's just this kind of pushback from your system's open, now it's going to close. So it's just a sort of natural rhythm. You don't have to worry about it. And part of it maybe something that, is a result of, because we are opening up, then all this stuff that's been under there that we haven't allowed up has a chance now to come up. So almost like a detoxification. You're starting to get the bad stuff and you think, what's going on? I'm practicing meditation. I'm getting worse. And it's not. It's that you actually are clearing the air so that the stuff can come up. It's that. And then the third thing also is just the fact that we weren't aware of it before. So now we're just becoming aware of what was always there, and it feels like it's new, but it's not. It's actually just being more sensitive to the stuff that we can see. We feel stuff that didn't feel unwholesome before, and now we're getting more sensitive. We can sense that they're unwholesome. And that was definitely, for my first 3 years, I felt like I was getting worse and worse. As a monk, I felt like I was going backwards. But I just kept going, and I can see now in retrospect it wasn't. It was just a part of the process. So, having a group like this is part of, as a layperson especially, that's part of it. So for us, we have the Sangha, it keeps us in. If you have relationships with people who are also practicing, Kalyana Mitta, the spiritual friends, that's a big part of it. So that helps you, you keep going because you have other people who are also kind of in it with you.
Ajahn, I got another question. When I sit down to meditate, I don't think about liberation, nirvana.
Yeah.
But Buddhists tend to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
But once you talk about it, you start to think, where is that? What is that? So to me, I think meditation is just a way of coping myself, knowing myself, without the end. I try not to put the end because we tend to be putting something, like a goal.
Yeah.
So should we live with a goal like that or shouldn't? Because it can be so overwhelming and it's crazy, trying to define that. Yeah.
Again, that's it's a great question. It's something that's individual also. Like for some people it helps. For some of us, myself included, it's really important to have this sense of where it's going and why. But also, in the end, you've got to let that, it's a paradox, you've got to let that go completely, or else you won't get there. You'd be like the donkey just chasing the carrot in a circle the whole time. So you basically have to come to a point where it really is just, you're not trying to get enlightened, you're not trying for anything, it's just this. And then paradoxically, that's when liberation can happen. So for some people, it'll help not to think about liberation at all. For other people, it is helpful because then it becomes more than just, a stress reduction exercise. It's something that actually is profound, and it can help, say, through your previous question, through those times when it doesn't seem to be working, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It's one of those things that can help to keep us, to kind of carry us through. But not for everybody. It's not necessary to have a kind of goal, especially when you sit down and meditate. At that point, you really want to just be letting everything go, including any ideas of getting liberated. You just want to be present in the way that you're choosing to practice. There's lots of different techniques you can use. Okay. One more, yeah.
The other day I was reading about 16 insights of Buddhism, something like that. So I just want to clarify, because we know that the big category of the meditation, we have samadhi meditation, focus on concentration, and the other one is vipassana. So so some people say that vipassana is essentially more important to achieve the insights, and some people say you have to go with the concentration first, then only you develop the strong enough the mental strength. So because I hear different views, opinions, so I just want to understand how I should pursue the spiritual
Yeah, it's one of those things you can spend endless years in confusion and debate if you wish. You can take a side and decide the other side's wrong, or you can just live with seeing doubt as doubt. So that's what I would recommend. Just see, okay, your own doubt around that is doubt. It's called, in Pali, there's a word for it called vichikicha, which I always like. It almost sounds like a doubt, like a vichikicha. You can this side, that side, and so that's the practice. And then we want to just see what's helpful. And if we've chosen to follow guidance from, say, someone who wants to give us some training in a specific way, well, then we take responsibility for our choice and we try to train in that way. And that may be, there's some methods which are technique-based, and you do something first and then something second. There are others like Rinpoche Cha and Ajahn Sumedho, my teacher, that were not technique-based, and so the techniques were part of a whole, and you're really just allowing the whole to settle, and you don't, like Ajahn Chah said, it's two sides of the same stick, which is the right, is it the same stick or is it two? And so basically it's not different in the end. We use these words in different ways. Different people will use them in different ways, which gets even more confusing. But basically, the kind of settling that the mind needs to do is for the purpose of insight and wisdom. And so some people will be more inclined, and maybe even it's necessary for them to first really develop, say, more of this kind of focused concentration, and other people will naturally be more, say, able, and it'd be helpful for them to go in with a more, say, investigative approach early on. And so then it's a matter of seeing what helps, seeing where your own predilections are. And if you do find yourself getting into doubt, and the Theravada world in particular is just riddled with, just full of people who are still in this doubt, kind of even after 30 years of looking for the right place to meditate, or then I would say, see that for what it is. Doubt is doubt. It's in the present moment. It's something which is obscuring the peace of the mind right now. Samadhi or vipassana, samadhi or vipassana, samadhi, vichikicha.
Follow up on that. So currently, what I try to do is I try to do 1 hour sitting meditation every day, mostly in the evening. And then during the day, unless I'm very busy at work, so I just try to observe my own feeling. If I see something, I feel pleasant or unpleasant. So that's basically the routine, how I'm doing that. So your advice is just stick to that, and then
stick to that. There's different ways to practice meditation. So that even just for the, it's not really samadhi versus vipassana. It's samatha versus vipassana. So samatha, in the way that I would use that word, is this more sort of focused, exclusive concentration where you're going in onto the object to the exclusion of everything else, and that can lead to absorption and be very beneficial. But that is a particular way which is different from, say, what I was doing the little guidance tonight, which is where you're trying specifically not to get too focused. You don't want to dive in. You don't want to exclude everything. You want to practice samadhi, but you don't want to go with this sort of narrowly focused samatha. So you're kind of just staying on the surface in a sense. You're not going with your thoughts. You're staying as consistently, continuously present as you can. That leads to a deeper samadhi, as I would call it. But it's sort of it's a different method than this kind of focus in where you're getting absorbed.
Right. Thank you.
Shall we, brothers and sisters, let's do the salutation to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavatam Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam namasami. Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho sangham namami. Thank you, Ka Ajahn.
Okay.